So this morning we're going to talk a little bit about the people piece, really. And I think it's a really interesting topic on the back of this tight talent market that we've been operating in. So it's just been really, really difficult to get good people. The recruitment piece on the back of COVID and that tight talent market, we've seen employers, I guess, spend quite a bit of time on their talent acquisition strategies, what they're doing that really well. And what can often happen is we get to that point, they're on board and we actually drop our game a little bit. So that's what we're going to have a bit of a conversation on this morning, is how do we maintain, how do we keep those high performers? When we talk about retention, it's not solely around development. And so I just wanted to, tick off first a couple of retention quick wins. So one of the first things I think is really crucial in retention is that we start doing onboarding really well. So we put all this time and money and effort into the recruitment piece, and then we can sort of have a day one and someone's thrown in the deep end and it will fall over. So onboarding, when I say onboarding, it's more than just a checklist. It is actually having a really good program in place. It might look like the first week, it might look like the first 2 weeks. You might actually have it out to the first 3 months, where you might be doing a 3-week check-in, a 6-week check-in, and just particularly if you're using a 90-day trial, a check-in just before that 3-month period. Have it planned, have it structured, and you'll find actually that is going to feed back into your retention of staff. My second point there is encourage connection. So the work that Gallup have done, and a lot of research since, actually shows that when we have friends and connections at work, that we are more likely to retain our people. So be really intentional about how you are connecting a newbie into your organisation and with the people that they are working with. My third point there is on flexibility. This whole shift to working from home, the research is mixed on that. But I think the idea of flexibility isn't just about where are you working, and in a lot of your businesses, you actually, particularly that customer service piece, we need people showing up at work. They need to be on site. But the flexibility component is really around hours of work. Time and time again in 360s and engagement surveys, this comes out as a real key reason why people are unhappy. It comes out in exit interviews time and time again. So being really clear on your communication, that's from, what do you expect of me? What does life in this organisation look like? What's the norm here? What am I meant to do here? So my expectations are really, really clear. Tell me how I fit in, how my work feeds into the bigger picture. Autonomy. Effectively, this is about giving some freedom to your employees. It's sort of the opposite of micromanagement. It's that space sitting in the macro management. But the greater control I feel I have over my work, I'm actually going to be way more engaged in my work. We talk about one-on-ones. So if you can create, particularly with some of your high performers, some space to give them your ear, it's really easy. You just need to show up and just listen and give them that space to talk, to share. I've popped in these stay conversations. So we'll often do an exit interview with someone on their way out, but actually by then to retain that person, it's too little too late. So if we start, particularly with our high performers, having conversations about, we love you, we want to keep you, what does this look like, what matters to you? And it might actually back up the list there. It might be about a bit more autonomy, it might be about a one-on-one, it might be about a bit more flexibility. But if we don't know, we can't change those things that will actually help to retain them. I am going to elaborate on a little bit more, but recognition, feedback, and development. So feedback from engagement surveys, exit interviews, culture surveys, 360s. are pretty consistent around the theme of development. Staff actually want to be developed. What is interesting is people will change jobs for remuneration, so for a higher rate, but often the minute they're in their new role, it actually goes to the bottom of the pile in terms of being a key element. If you've got people that you're really wanting to keep, focusing on their development is literally the key retention strategy. So what I want to introduce to you is the concept of a skill-will matrix. So this is just a really simple tool, but it is useful to think about your people based on this matrix. So we have sort of at one axis what we call will. So that's sort of want to or attitude. Is this person got the right attitude showing up? This stuff is actually really hard to teach. So in the bottom quadrant, where we've got someone whose skill level is low and whose attitude sucks, want for a better word, it actually requires us to manage them. What I will say is if you don't manage your low performers, the biggest impact will be on your high performers, and that will actually impact retention. So what we've got in the rest of these quadrants is when we've got sort of low skill but a really great attitude, as a manager and a leader, is to move into that mentoring space. And in the top corner, we've got this thing called coaching, and this is where your high performers sit. What I do see at the moment is when we have really high performers, we can drop the ball with them. They actually need something quite different from you in terms of leading them and managing them. So if you have high performers, actually make sure you think about them and how you're going to do it with them. You know, I've got a couple on my team and I actually find it really quite hard work because I need to be a different person and I need to show up in a really good headspace to be there for them in a different way than maybe I do for our grad on the team. So this is an adaptation of the Hershey-Blanchard situational leadership, which is effectively the same quadrant but done on a spectrum. And where I think this is useful is this more talks about the employee life cycle. So really where they come in and they don't know a lot, and then they move through and they learn and they become more capable. And so our leadership changes as we go through across your life cycle or as we go around the quadrants. And as they move through and into that sort of top quadrant of where we need to start coaching them, is we step out and we as a leader step back and we give them greater control. And the two I want to just touch on first is around the coaching and the mentoring. So what's the difference between when we're mentoring somebody and when we're coaching? So this is useful to think because the difference is actually the skill. And the analogy I use is to think about gold. So if I am mentoring you and I'm trying to teach you a skill of sorts or develop you in some way, it's because I have the gold at this point. I have the knowledge, I have the skill set, or I have the experience. Yep. So the gold is with me, and in a mentoring relationship, I'm sharing it with you. When we coach, thinking about our high performer, skill and attitude, both high, they have the gold. My job as the coach is to help you find your gold. So we run a conversation that's quite different than the mentoring conversation. So what I want to talk on a little bit more is this concept of coaching. And the reason why I want to land here is because this is your high performers and these are the people you absolutely want to retain, without question. So what is coaching? And coaching is quite a structured approach to a conversation. There is quite a conversational framework that sits behind the discussion that you're having. One of the key pieces is that it is around having an outcome. So we are working towards something in that conversation. So we will talk about the concept of having a goal in that conversation. As a good coach, we can't assume that what's front of mind for us is actually the challenge that's sitting there for the employee. We have to actually hear from that individual in terms of what's going on for them right now that's getting in the way of their high performance. What makes a good coach? A good coach is self-aware. A good leader is self-aware. It does need trust. We're dealing with a high performer, and if they don't trust you, then you having an open, transparent conversation with them is probably just never going to go well. So to start trying to have some of these conversations without that in place is not actually going to work. And the biggest piece of advice here is this next one, is not having the answer. Okay, so a good coach is dumb, is lazy, and is a little bit heartless. So effectively, we are asking questions here. That's our conversational framework. We are wearing a completely different hat when it comes to these high performers. So, the key with coaching is the power is in the question. And effectively, as a good coach, you give no advice. But if you're really interested in working on your coaching as a leader, this GROW model is a really simple conversational framework. There are a number of ones, but this is probably the most common. And effectively, it's an acronym for goal, reality, option, or wrap up, or way forward. And so arguably, we can't coach without a goal. So we really need to know, what is that person wanting from this conversation with us? What's the reality? So what's going on right now? We go to what are our options? And actually, it's often at this point, people will come up with some really fast options quickly because they've thought of them before and they haven't worked. So at this point, we really need people to be thinking for themselves, And at this point for me, it's really hard because I often want to give advice, but that's not my role. So I will swap that out with saying, if I was to give you some advice, what do you think I would say? And then our W, which is our wrap up or our way forward, write that down. What are you going to do? How am I going to know you've done it? Why don't you email me? So you tie in some accountability piece. Another key retention tool in terms of developing your people is delegate. When we don't delegate, it actually means we are not empowering or developing our people. If you're a perfectionist, if you are quite independent in how you roll, then this could be your work on. So my final point really was in that far quadrant, which was that leadership piece. Probably the piece that I think we miss is actually setting the vision for our team and saying, where are we actually going as an organisation? And where does your role fit in? And what does high performance look like in your role? So that comes back to my point around clarity and communication. Think about this. If I showed up to your organisation and asked all of your team members about what did success look like in each of their roles, can they say yes? And if you can't really put hand on heart and answer that question, then there is some leadership required of you. It's just in terms of what does their role look like? What are the goals? What do they need to be doing? How does all this fit together?